Hello, my friend and friends, and welcome to my podcast journal, Musings. My name is Kevin, and in this podcast, I generally talk about whatever is front of mind for me in any given week, usually in some way that's related to front-end development. But this week is a little bit different because I've got a really fun conversation that I had with Adam Argyle that I'm going to be sharing with you. During this conversation, first of all, we recorded it pre-holiday season when I wasn't fighting a cold, so my voice will sound a little bit better once we jump into the content itself. But during it, we talk about, first of all, Adam's favorite new CSS features from 2024 that sort of evolves into just a discussion about a lot of really cool things that have landed over time. Then we sort of move into more pain points and issues where Adam actually shares some of the things and problems he's been having with anchor positioning, and just how there's, first of all, a lot, like an insane amount of new stuff that is happening, and there's actually a whole bunch now that might be out actually by the time this podcast lands, because he was talking about early January for the next big thing in Chrome where there was a ton of new CSS things coming, and how, it was exciting, and talk a little bit about that. But then also about how browsers have changed a little bit with how they're shipping features, and how that can actually cause some problems. Like there's sometimes the feature is now shipping and then it's changing, even though it's considered like this is what it will be. And then it's like, oh, look, we've changed the syntax. So we talk about a bit of the pain of that as well, and why that happens, and everything. And that actually leads us into part of a bigger discussion into the type of work that Adam's doing with the Chrome DevRel team, along with Bramis and Yuna. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff too. It was a really, really fun conversation that I had with him. I will give you a very quick word of warning before we dive into it, that if you're listening to this on a podcatcher and not watching on YouTube, there is one bit where I'm actually opening up the browser as Adam talks about carousel things. And he does a really good job of explaining what he's talking about. And if you can't see it, I really don't think it's going to impact anything. But he might be like, oh yeah, and you can see that there, or something like that. So just so you know, that will happen for a little bit, but it's just a very small bit of our conversation. And I'll put links to everything that we're talking about in the show notes. So if you want to check them out as we're going through it or afterwards, that option is there. And with that way too long of an introduction out of the way, let's dive into it, where we're going to drive right in where I've brought up the CSS Wrapped 2024 page that has a list of all the new features that Chrome added. And we use that to help inspire and kick off our discussion about all the new features that have landed in 2024. Out of everyone I know, you're one of the people who gets very excited by all the new CSS stuff coming. And there was a lot of really good stuff in here. That there were 17 features. If you were going to call out like your favorite ones that came out this year, is there any that for you really were like, yes, that's like, this changes the game? Or whether, and this could be like, this changes the game for everybody, or this is just something I'm going to use all the time even if nobody else cares. Like, it was really exciting for me.
Oh, I'm definitely a good person for this. I mean, you can see it just on my own website, nerdy.dev, where I've got view transitions and scroll-driven animations, and they're progressively enhanced. So if you come from a browser that those aren't there, it's no big deal. So I find myself using a lot of this stuff right away. There are certain features that were like less exciting than others. But okay, so in terms of what of the 17 features are the best, it's so hard to prioritize them. But I mean, scroll-driven animations, I love them so much. Mm-hmm. I use them all the time, and they go really well with scroll snap. So I'm a scroll snap connoisseur. Mm-hmm. And so now I love that I've got scroll-driven animations that can sort of bring life into the interaction. The scroll snap events, even though that's JavaScript, those have been really handy. And then view transitions. I use those all the time too. You get quick, really nice looking animations for like demos and stuff with just wrapping a simple DOM modification with a function, and all of a sudden you get these pseudos. It's really cool stuff. For DX, I mean, is nesting, some of the updates to nesting are in there. So it took out some of the the light dark function. I use the crap out of when I'm playing around these days. I love that one. Oh yeah. So smooth, so quick. But I also like color scheme, so it's like, I'm tied into that world. Paint order seems to be resonating with a lot of people, which is funny. I mean, it looks good. You definitely want the second version of the demo, because the first one looks so broken.
Yeah.
But we've lived so long without it, so it's like, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that people didn't use a lot of stroke on text anyway, so the paint order never really came in. But now maybe we'll see it more because we can fix it. We'll see what happens. I remember the first time.
What happens.
I mean, ages ago, when the first time I did something for a stroke on text, and it was just, you could even see some of the characters the way, like, I can't say it was the R like part of the R was like completely disconnected, like the leg on it or whatever had like a stroke around just the leg or something.
Yeah.
You're just like, what's going on? I don't understand how this font was created. So yeah, I think I find it interesting with a few of them just because like when I was looking through the list, I was like, some of these are things that I think, like obviously with scroll driven animations, like it's so easy to just be like, look at this, it looks amazing, and like it's so cool when
Yeah.
it's opening up. Whereas obviously things like say at property, like we've had it for a bit now, but it's finally across in the different browsers, but like it's not fancy. It doesn't change something
Yeah.
immediately, but it just opens up like, oh, we can do all these other things now that we couldn't do before, and it ends up becoming useful. But yeah, so it's interesting, and I'm always curious to see which ones actually like in the public gain the attention compared to the regular ones. Because sometimes I think it's the ones we don't expect sometimes that people sort of start using day to day, that you're like, oh, that's the one that you ended up becoming well known. Okay, cool.
Yep, happens all the time. We're like, oh, you're gonna go with that. That's cool. But yeah, take it and run. We're like glad you
Yeah,
found a part of this thing to be excited about.
Yeah.
I
know
agree
for
that some
me,
aren't as exciting though, like backdrop inheritance. You're like, ew, that's a thing we got. You gave that
Yeah.
to me. What did you even give me? You're like, well, really, I'm making it so that when you do set something, you don't have to go. Anyway, just don't worry about it. This one's just don't even worry. It's a fix.
Yeah. I know for me, anchor positioning is one of the ones I think is going to take off just because it's such a pain point for people.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although it's tricky as hell. I've been an anchor in carousel land for like a couple weeks, and anchoring is, I do love anchoring, but I'm also frustrated more at anchoring than I ever have been with almost any CSS. And before anchoring, my hardest one to get a hold of was view timelines. So scroll driven animations did not click easily for me. It took me, I wrote multiple articles, multiple demos, and still sometimes it'll get me. But anchoring is a little different because it has the IMCB, the immediate the immediate containing block or whatever, and which is invisible. You can't see it. It's totally there, but nothing is good at telling you what it is, and it can collapse on you, just like when you put containment on a container. All of a sudden, it doesn't have any height and width anymore, and then you don't know why. You can also, the centering keywords can get you into scenarios that you don't. It is littered with complex edge cases, but it's also so easy at first. You're just like a couple of properties and you got yourself a beautifully positioned thing. So it's just classic CSS, easy to get started, impossible to master, wildly capable, but with numerous foot guns. But yes, anchor is amazing.
And I do think it's going to be one of those because I somebody brought me into a thread on Blue Sky, I think, where they were saying like, how come it's not working with Flexbox? And so I was like, oh, I'm curious because maybe it doesn't. And it had nothing to do with Flexbox. It was just the way they'd organized it, and they were using a position relative somewhere. And I think whatever it was, I'm like, oh, you just need to do this instead, and then it works. And they're like, oh, okay, because we've been so trained with positioning up until now, like there's habits to break and different ways that it's working. So it depends if you're using anchoring or not using anchoring, how these things are related to one another. And it's going to be, there's going to be some articles written where people are upset when the thing isn't working, I think. Yeah.
Oh, the amount of the bugs that people are going to report is crazy. So like one thing with anchor positioning that caught me off guard the other day, and I'm like literally every day something catches me wildly off guard with anchoring. But this one was, I thought I could be done with position relative. I was like, oh, I don't need relative anymore. I just anchor stuff to things. And I had a bug where I had a scroll. It was a carousel scroller where there's like a little a watched check mark. Actually, you want to go to the demo? Do you have Canary?
Yeah.
Want to see anything fancy? Yeah. Okay. So if you scroll to the left a little bit, back towards season 1, or even just click season 1. Yeah. So see in the top right each of those boxes, there's a little check mark.
Oh yeah. Yep.
To indicate that they've been watched by you. Those are all anchored there, and I was like, cool, I'll just anchor those into the corner. So obviously the check mark is a child of that card. And since it's a horizontal scroller and those things are anchored, I was getting all this horizontal overflow on the page. And I was like, where did all this overflow come from? And it turns out all the little anchored things, when they scrolled off screen, were still like demanding space from something. And so I had to go put position relative on the card to contain the anchored elements wild bounds that it was building. It was really annoying.
Yeah, that's weird. That someone was just asking me something about something where they were getting, I'm like, they didn't mention they were using anchoring, but they were getting like extra space overflow from something. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. So every one of those was creating, is it because they were living in the grid? And so it was making extra
it wasn't making columns.
It was just using more space.
Like it was like they were unbounded. It was like they were unfettered anchored elements inside a scroller, and it was just they're containing boxes that they needed to do this in. We're building up some sort of space and dimensions that then caused a bunch of shenanigans. And I was like, here I am just thinking I'm going to instantly, there's keywords for anchoring to the top right. Yeah, sure enough, I anchored it there right away, but it took me forever to do anything else. This demo is really fun, though. So those season titles are generated by CSS. They don't have an HTML element. Also, if you use the arrow keys, they operate like arrows because they are a marker created for the first item in a series for each chapter. So it's like each chapter's 10 episodes. The first one gets a class on it, and then I generate markers for this scroller based on those classes. And the browser says, okay, well then here's those elements, and then I can anchor them to the top left. I can style them however I want. I can put content inside of those markers. Anyway, it's really cool stuff.
How does the keyboard interaction work?
They're generated by the browser, and they emulate a radio group. And here, click any of the other demos on the left there. They'll have dots instead of titles. So that one kind of is acting like tabs. Here's one, okay, big old hero slider. I don't think this one has dots in it, so that one's just marker buttons. So also those buttons generated by the browser. Those buttons generated by the browser. And then that one, instead of dots, I did squares because people like to do that. So there's also scroll state animations there. So they're scroll triggered. When that element becomes snapped, it triggers through a CSS scroll state query, which then triggers a staggered reveal of all the items inside the hub. So yeah, no JavaScript on this entire site, not a lick anywhere, and you'll see some pretty cool interactions.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to poke around in here a little bit.
Well, good luck, because DevTools does not represent those. Since they're generated, they're very funky, and so the tip is, if you do go looking, select the carousel in DevTools, scroll down to the very bottom of the styles pane where you'll see the pseudo elements, and there you can dink around with the styles.
Okay, yes, right, yeah. That's interesting.
It's a little tricky.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm building this site out to kind of showcase that these new, so it's like basically 3 CSS features, including anchoring and then including scroll state queries, but it's 3 carousel features that are going to allow me to build any carousel that I ever see accessibly. And it's just CSS. It's kind of fun. Just got to know how to use scroll snap.
It looks like you have a lot of ideas that haven't been built yet.
I have a lot of ideas that haven't been built. Yeah, I have quite a backlog. I think I just added the 3D one like last night. I was like, I can just add a view timeline. Oh, it's the first one where I did a view timeline in one of the carousels, because the other ones had been scroll triggered. This one's scroll linked. And yeah, so yeah, it manages that. There it is. Scrolls. Again, the scroll triggered animations. Just kind of like a cover flowy type effect, and it's only a few lines of styles. That's a bug right there, where the pagination isn't smoothly going there. Yeah, I think it's something I did with the 3D that's making it nuts. Oh, here's the most wild one. Go to the paged example. Maybe it says pages or paged.
Pages, yes.
Okay, this one, the browser, since it's generating dots, it generates dots. So grab the resize handle on the bottom right, and watch the dots change.
Just does it on its own.
So I'm using CSS columns. That's not a grid layout. It's a columns layout. And for each column that gets made, I can target it and make it a scroll snap target. And each column can get a marker generated for it. So that's why we see dots made for the dynamic resizable amount of items that could fit in there per page. This is like wildly powerful. And yeah, it's just CSS.
That's really cool. Nice.
So
I'm impressed. Yeah.
that's a cool one. The carousel stuff is great.
That's really awesome. Of course, people ask, do we need more carousels?
Yeah, they keep saying that. And then I went on Netflix the other day, and that was the only widget. It was 3 different types of carousels. And I was like, this entire experience is carousels. So people can whine about them all day, and then they'll sit down on their couch and interact with them without even thinking.
I think it's different when you're on, like if it's, say, a quote-unquote app experience versus like a website where all of a sudden you have like, I think when people think carousel, they think of the hero carousel on some
like I put
marketing
in there,
website,
the slider.
right? Yeah. And not necessarily the other one. So like if you're on your TV or you're on your phone, especially with touch, like side scrolling is so normal. Where, so I think part of it's about the name carousel gets a little bit of a stigma to it when it's the way the way the interaction's actually happening isn't always that traditional thing, or we're not necessarily hiding the content somewhere. We're just, it depends on what the content is, and it's why is the person interacting with it and everything else that comes with it.
Yep, I think we got a bad taste in our mouths from those auto playing humongous sliders that were at the top of web pages for a while.
Since you're really good at coming up with cool use cases for things, I need to know what the use case is for field sizing.
Oh, there's multiple. Okay, so one of the main ones for me is the traditional select element. It was always the width of the widest element. And even with JavaScript, you couldn't accurately make it fit. Okay, the use case for me in that scenario is, let's say you have a paragraph. And the paragraph has a couple of interactive words in it, like a genre of movies. So you're like, I would like to see horror movies. And where it says horror was in a select element. And that select element, I wanted it to appear, so I'd get rid of the borders and everything so it fit right in. It's like a normal word in the sentence. But until field sizing, I couldn't shrink the width of that to the width of what was selected. And so it always created this obnoxious space when it's in line. And so that's one really handy thing. And then the other one is the text area, being able to auto grow to whatever you're typing in it without any JavaScript is also really awesome.
So that would be, So the
width grows and the height grows.
And the height grows, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So on GitHub, that was like they had a whole JavaScript, complicated JavaScript setup to handle that in the comments area, and they got to rip it out and replace it with one CSS property, which is pretty common these days. People ripping out chunks of JS for a little bit of CSS.
Yes, it's becoming more common. Yeah. Is there anything else in here that I wanted to specifically talk about? Because the field sizing one, I was looking at it at first, and I was like, I do, especially with the selects, and I kept seeing that as like an option. I'm like, but why would I want it to fit the text inside? But what you said makes a lot of sense. So
it's also like when you have a really long option in there that's next to short ones, that it gets also really obnoxious. Even on my website, nerdy.dev, in mobile, in the top left, I have a drop-down menu. And that's so where you had like blog and notes, these filters, those turn into a select element in the mobile menu. And that select element, I need it to fit in the nav and look pretty. There you go. I want the arrow to sit to the right of the word.
Right.
Simple enough, right? No, not without field sizing. Without field sizing, I have to guesstimate how many characters, and it's always wrong, which means either the word is cut off and the arrow is sitting there, or the arrow is really far away. But with field sizing, the arrow is always perfectly sat next to the word.
Yeah, that's a good example. Cool.
The other thing too about the side nav there, it's using interpolate size. Oh, not this, not on nerdy.dev, but on the CSS wrapped one.
Yep.
That expando, collapso. So that's dog fooding, all sorts of stuff. So not only is there scroll driven animations highlighting them, it's using interpolate size, so that way you can animate, open and close. That's why you see it.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's just a summary details. And then it's also using starting style. It's also using the new details content pseudo element. And so it's like a lot of those first few things in that list are being used on the page you're on in a progressively enhancing way, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. The stylable details, and people have been
and the exclusive accordion. That's why only one is open at a time. Yep.
And that's such a, like, when that got added, it was like, oh, that's that was easy. There's nothing, for anyone who doesn't know, you just give them all the same, you have the details, give them all the same name, and then only one of them will be open at a time. So it's,
it's
it works
so
out
cool.
really well. Yeah. Actually, I also wanted to ask how you decided to, like, components made sense. For the ones that are in developer experience, I was surprised that the popover API was in here. I guess it's something that doesn't directly, impact the user. It's more about how we develop that thing. But I guess I was just like, oh, I'm surprised the popover and the starting style weren't thrown in interaction. Not that it's a big deal, but I was just curious if you had any insights.
Yeah. I have some. So a lot of those groupings were done by me, and they were different groupings to begin with. And as we kept building the site, I kept changing them. We also ripped out, by the way, like 7 features that didn't get added because they didn't make it in 2024. They're gonna make it in January 1 of 2025.
Oh no!
which by the way, 2025 January expect like one of the biggest drops of CSS stuff in a while. So
do we have any
excited for that?
Yeah,
the select element, customizable select is dropping. The carousel work is dropping. Text box trim is dropping.
Yes.
And I think there's one more, maybe advanced attribute. You know how right now you can't take a data attribute and concatenate it with something else in CSS? Soon you'll be able to. So January is going to be pretty hot.
Cool. Yeah. Speaking of things that will probably sort of go under the radar, but end up getting wide use. I think that the text box trim stuff is going to just be like part of the normal. We use that all the time without thinking about it too much. Yeah, it's just such a quality of life. Like, oh, I can just fix all of these alignment issues that I've been suffering instantly.
Seriously, all my buttons, all my tags. There's so many different use cases that are really nice.
Just magic numbering the different padding top and bottom on a button.
It'll be history. Yeah, I can't wait till that's history. People will be like, why'd you do 2 rem, 1 rem? And you're like, back in my day. But to answer the question, I think developer experiences ended up being kind of a catch-all. And it was just like, if it wasn't user facing, like a user doesn't know if it's a popover or not. Like they don't really care. So that was kind of the reasoning there. It's like, this is more for developers. It's easier for us to put things there. We now have a space for these overlay experiences. It's just like, it's easier on developers. Users will get things like accessibility out of it. And there's lots of great gains for users in it too. But users aren't asking for popovers. Would you add a popover in this? They might say like, add an animation to this, component or whatever. But yeah.
And
funny.
Since we're on the developer experience one, actually, with the changes to nesting that were made. So if people don't know, so when nesting first came out, I'll ask because I remember any rules were hoisted or reverse. The other way around. Any normal rules would go above
any nesting. Yeah.
Any nesting. So if you had any rules in there, even if it was like a media query in the middle, the rule underneath it would end up. No, the rule in the media query would win because it would get put down at the bottom. Right.
Yeah,
the order of things would change.
The order of things would change from
inside.
appearance, and so if you were counting on the fact that I wrote it after the media query, it should be this. Yeah, that wouldn't be true. But
it wouldn't be true, and it is now. Was it originally done the other way for technical reasons, and then there was a solution that came up, or was it a decision that was made that then got, people were like, this isn't how we actually write CSS, we want you to change it?
This was this was a really early idea in the nesting syntax. Talking with Tab about it, I'm pretty sure Tab just did what Sass did, and also one of the technical limitations was the CSS OM, and that's why this is called CSS OM nested declarations. Is all of the nesting has to get represented in a tree or in an object, and to have these sort of ephemeral nested groupings that, like, if you think about it, right, you had some styles, then some nesting, and then some not nesting. It's just like, how are they going to represent that in an object? And so essentially what they do is they wrap it in an and. That's the hotkey.
Yes. Yep.
And so once they just were like, well, we'll just do this on behalf of users, That way their visual order can make sense. It's kind of like when you write a nested app media query and then you don't specify what's your nesting again. It just sort of inherits with the and in there. You're just doing the same thing there. It was requested at the beginning that it should work the way that it does now, but the limitation was there. They were like, basically, it got brushed aside early on because people don't do that. People don't do that. It's not there, but people don't do that. And then all of a sudden, like, even Alan Stearns, who's like one of the main folks on the CSS working group, goes and scrubs the Adobe SAS style sheets, and he's like, oh, people do that. he's like, it's not even in there just a couple times. Like, it's all over this. And they wanted to correct it. And so it's nice that they corrected it. I like that they've been doing more changes too. Like another one has been the inability previously to nest pseudo elements with pseudo states.
Yes.
That's also fixed. So those will be able to work as you expected. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And that one's coming out. That one came out because carousel and select both needed it, where you've got these pseudo elements that are new and special with lots of new pseudo states, and people are nesting. They're like, oh, I'm going to nest my way. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, this doesn't work. And it was dumb that it didn't work, and now it'll work.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good. Because that was just that, like, that one thing we were like, why isn't, it was frustrating when that wouldn't work. Yeah. And it's interesting when you were saying, like, comparing the nesting in the native CSS to how it worked in SAS. And I think there's like the mental shift there a little bit, because in SAS, you know, it's compiled to something else. So it makes sense that they pull it out and then have to build something. And I never questioned it when it was there, but and I've used SAS for a decade or, a long time now anyway. And it was never a thing that I thought about. It was just like, that's how it works. And then as soon as it was in native CSS, I'm like, this is stupid. Why is it working this way? Like, so yeah, that's interesting that, that it changed a little bit or whatever. They matched now sort of, or how this is working. They updated it to more how people expect it to be working. Yeah.
Yep. It's taking out all those little splinters and making it easy.
Mm-hmm. It is one of those things. I guess I don't really hear about it. The main thing I hear about is when I talk about something that doesn't have perfect browser support. People are like, oh, I can't use that thing because of browser support or whatever. But you probably hear it more when it comes to, like, we're seeing now things like nesting and scroll-driven animations and these other things that are making it into the browser past, like, the initial thing, right? Because at first it's behind a flag in Canary, and then eventually it's just in Canary and people are playing with it, and then eventually it finally, everyone agrees on the spec's done, it makes it into the browsers, and then there's tweaks happening still, like, with that, and it seemed to be like, that seems to be happening a lot. And do you hear people getting annoyed with that, or is it more like it's good that we're going through these iterations now? Is it good that it's still a little bit fluid even once it's shipped, just because then we can make sure we're like, oh, it's really early days, we can fix these problems, and then they'll be good going forward? Like, what do you hear from people?
This is definitely a topic. And the DevRel team has been requesting we ship less fast. And because like I'm the one hammering on this a lot, where I'm like, I don't think it's cool that we're acting like a JavaScript framework. We're not. And people they should be getting something stable and good. We shouldn't be experimenting on them in these iterations. That's not cool, especially because we can't deprecate things. Like, there's a lot of reasons to not move so fast. And there's like pushback that's like incremental updates. They're like, these are just incremental updates. And we'll incrementally update things later until we have the, like, select elements is a good one. They're like, we'll ship select without select multiple support out the gate. I'm like, that's not cool. You should have a solution for because you can't, once you've sat down and seen the complexities of what multiple is going to do, that you're going to have wished that you made some different decisions on previous things, but you're not going to be able to nudge them because they're in stone in the browser forever. So there's a lot of us that are calling for a slowdown. Though I don't think it'll really happen. I think they're being more conscious about it. Like the whole anchor stuff needing renamed, and we're like, oh, in Chrome 128 to 130 whatever, you have to not do that, and then afterwards you can just do this new thing. Aren't you happy? And it's like, no one is happy with that. We do not want to rename. We don't want. Early adopters are feeling more pain now than they ever had before, and that's not cool. I don't like that at all.
Yeah. So is that just more
So
of a question of leaving it behind a flag for longer? And because I think part of the reason it gets changed is feedback from people, probably. Like I know the new
yeah.
anchoring things to me make a lot more, like all the names. I'm like, oh, this makes more sense than the old ones because just the consistency behind them. And is it just that there's not an, like, if it's behind a flag, the whole point there is let's try this out, use it. It hasn't shipped yet, nothing's official. But then there's just not enough people playing with it, so you're not getting the feedback that's required.
Yep. Yeah, there's too much that gets learned once it ships. The naming of the anchor ones, that was brought up by Apple folks. That wasn't from usage. Well, it sort of was. It's like people are going to center on the top a lot. And it was like, cool. So you do anchor bottom minus 50% of the anchor's width or whatever. And they were like, yeah, we know that you made it so it was possible, but shouldn't it be easier? And so that I was like, oh yeah, let's just add some names for these common patterns that people are going to do. That was an easy one to change. But changing from inset area to position area, you're like, people shouldn't have to deal with that. That noise that should have been history. Like, I don't think that was a good rename. This should have just been inset area. Who cares? But then so we cause a lot of churn with people, which decreases adoption. It makes people more timid to get into something because, hey, maybe it's in one or two browsers, but they've changed things before. I want to wait to get into it. And then the rate of new things that are happening is a lot. So it's like some people are feeling overwhelmed that they can't keep up. Simultaneously, we're shipping so fast people can't keep up, and we're making them rework things conversely, if we were shipping too slow, people complain that it's too slow, and that shipping too fast actually creates this perception of like a really healthy platform. Even though it's annoying to you, you're like, well, at least it's not dead or dying. You know, it's alive and kicking. You're like, crap, I can't even keep up. It's sprinting faster than me. This is... So there's a lot of tensions that pull this stuff in different directions, from leadership teams and then engineers wanting to ship things to people that don't have greenfield projects, so they can't. There's a lot of people that are like, I'm in a 5-year code base. We don't adopt anything. We just don't. It's a beast. No one wants to touch it. We do everything we can to like not touch anything. We're not going to refactor our dialogue to use the dialogue element. No. Do you know how many dialogues are in our app? It's like, we're not going to do it. So yeah, this is a very tough and conversation topic that's very forefront of our minds. Is we wanted to reduce how much noise we put in there. Like, we didn't want to put experimental features in CSS Wrapped. Actually, we wanted to, but we felt that it would do a disservice to folks who are already feeling overwhelmed to feel more overwhelmed. And I didn't want to go write about customizable select or CSS carousel things when stuff is getting changed the name all the time. And I'm like, I don't like leaving a wake of old names of things behind, at least not on web.dev. I'll tweet about them all day. I'm like, hey, this stuff's coming. Here's its current name. That's temporary, but yeah. It's a good question though, dude.
I ran into that problem with the anchor positioning article on, I don't know if it was web.dev or the Chrome for Developers blog. One of the two of them.
That's also confusing, isn't it? Do you know what the difference is?
Yes. No, I don't.
Yeah, no one does, except the authors who manage those publications. Bramus has been trying to unite them. He's like, people don't know, they don't care, but they know that when one shows up on here, it's anyway. So get back to your story. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it was one of Yuna's early articles on it, and it was using the older syntax, and I was trying something and it wasn't working. I'm just like, what? I know I'm doing this right. I was so frustrated. And then I'm like, oh, okay. All right, and even now, VS Code still auto-completes to the old syntax too.
Yeah,
like, fix
and
that,
DevTools
please.
at some point was it? Yeah, seriously, that's what I mean. It's like we pump it out too early, and it creates noise for a long time. So it's like, we don't have to move that fast.
It is, and it's one of those things definitely that I think, depending on who, like you're saying, like you're hearing some sides saying you need to ship faster, or more like, let's keep it going. We need to show what's, that there's progress being made. I see the other side, what you're saying. People are just like, I can't keep up with everything that's going on. Like it's insane, and sort of, finding that balance. And then also, like, for a lot of people that are just working all day long, like even if they sort of keep a pulse on things, it's like, okay, that's cool, but I know I can't use it right away because I need to wait for browser support to be better. And then so even if you're just using like the baseline, the wide support, what is it?
Widely available. Yeah.
Widely available. That's it. Like the amount of time you have to wait before that happens, you've forgotten about it. Like you don't know that, like, so it's, not only keeping up with things, but then keeping up with browser support of those things and everything else. It is, a lot of people express to me of like, how do you keep up with it? I'm like, I try my best. And it's hard. And then even I talked to Bramis a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and I don't remember what the topic was that we mentioned, but he's just like, oh, I've been so into the view transitions and this other thing, like I don't even know how that works. Like this is what I've been focused on. And I'm like, yeah, that's I think an important thing to remember is that even the people that are really involved in it have their focus areas and know some parts of it better than others.
100%. Oh man, you just described so many different things that I tell my managers or people around me too. Your adoption story that you summarized, that's almost like word for word for what I say. I'm like, because my managers or people up, at the Chrome leadership team are like, hey, why isn't Subgrid more adopted or whatever? And I basically tell them a story just like you. I'm like, well, they heard about it, and then they looked at the browser support and said, sweet, can't use it. Then they maybe heard about it again later, and they're like, sweet, still can't use it. And then they're like, oh, is it widely available now? Has it been out in browsers for 2 years? I don't even have a project that I need that on right now, so the timing's not good. And then magically, this one moment comes together. It's like, it's like, I'm ready. The feature's ready. We're ready. Oh, we could finally implement somewhere. And usually it's a greenfield project because people don't tend to refactor old work. And so, yeah, adoption is tough because there's a lot of factors, and some of them are even social. Like you don't get time to explore at your job. Some people don't get the opportunity to tinker. So there's no room for that. Anyway, yes, very hot topic. And yeah, even the people that are supposed to know this stuff all the time, we miss it constantly. And I ask Bramis for help on stuff.
What are you most focused on? What you were saying, obviously you're doing a lot with the carousel stuff. You were super involved with scroll-driven animations, scroll snap stuff. I guess now, is there anything that you're sort of top of the list going on for you, or is it still mostly in those things?
Yeah, my focus areas, so like the Chrome DevRel team is Una, Bramis, and I. Bramis focuses on view transitions and scroll-driven animations, more of a performance-tuned animation side of things, where he'll dig into the browser implementation details and just sort of like work those things out. I'm generally the typography, color, and scroll snap or scroll interaction person. And Una is kind of like our team lead. She does a lot of like planning, organizing. She's previously led a lot of the select work as well as the CSS next working groups. But I mean, she's been gone for a while. She's going to come back and be like, what is everything? There's so much new. And we're like, yeah, there is. Sorry about that. Like select, so much of the stuff in the select work that she was focused on has got renamed again for like the 6th time. That one has gone through so much thrashing, it's driving me nuts. I'm like, please, in January, don't release something that we have to rename pieces of. I just really don't want to do that to people. So yeah, those have been my focus. But next year, my focus is going to be carousel almost the whole year, as well as supporting select. I think that's like with select, no one has made a select element that uses all these new features that is mobile and tablet and desktop ready with animations and all the whiz bangs. And I've got one that's like really full featured on desktop, and it's already like at almost 200 lines of code and some complex requirements in the markup. And I'm just like, the things that people are going to be building with this is going to be wild, and it's going to take a lot of code, but it will be all CSS, and it's going to be really neat at the end. But get ready. It's gonna be a long video you put out, Kevin, that talks about the select element. The carousel stuff should be pretty quick. You'd be like, hey, let's add buttons to a scroller. 5 lines of CSS later, we've got buttons. Now let's style them. Here's the fun part. But select is like, it's heavy. It's heavy stuff.
I guess there was a reason that we haven't had a proper one for so long, because it's not such an easy nut to crack. But it's good that it's feature rich and we're not getting like this half-baked little thing that's like, oh, I can do something with it, but I still have other use cases outside of this. That's not what we need right now. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time in chatting with me. We've been talking for a while now, so I don't want to take up your entire afternoon.
No worries. This is the fun part. This was very enjoyable. Yeah, thanks.
I don't know, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you for nerding out with CSS and for all of the work that you put into stuff like CSS Wrapped and letting everybody else know about all the cool stuff and all the demos and everything else that you're constantly building that are super inspirational. And there we have it. Once again, a huge thank you to Adam for his time in having this conversation with me. Really enjoyed it. And if there was anything we talked about along the way, or just you want to follow Adam and the stuff he's up to and all the cool demos and other things that he's constantly sharing, links to everything, once again, are in the show notes down below to everything he's doing and all the different things we talked about along the way here. And thank you very much for listening as well. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.